This is the Erasing Shame podcast. Honest talk for healthy living, growing, and thriving.
Welcome to another episode of Erasing Shame. My name is DJ Chuang, and I'll be serving as your host. And on this episode, I'm joined with my longtime friend who I've met like in 1997. So you can do the math. That's like 26. Oh, sorry, I'm not going to do the math. Over 20 years. And his name and his wife is Curtis Lowe and Carol. And I met them at the church that they are currently serving at again, round two. They serve as pastor and pastor's wife at Chinese Christian Church of Thousand Oaks, and that's north of California. How far is that from Los Angeles, to give people a point of reference there?
It's about 40 miles from downtown LA and about 25 miles or so from maybe 30 miles from Santa Barbara.
Okay, very good. So within driving distance of 1 million plus people.
Yes.
And it's been a fruitful ministry. And I first met Curtis when I was still in seminary and preparing for that next season of life and considering how to be a pastor. And since that time, I have graduated from seminary and pastored for a while, and then spent most of my time working in Christian nonprofits and digital marketing and philanthropy and some kind of other things. But mental health has become a part of my life since 2000 when I was diagnosed bipolar. And so I wanted to have a conversation with my old friends here, Curtis and Carol, because of their life experiences as well, not only in working with a lot of people and also in a shame-based culture, as well as a program that they've started that will be really helpful for many of us who are listening to Erasing Shame, as well as people in the faith and in the community. So thank you for joining me for this chat and this conversation.
Thank you for having us. It's good.
So let me start with Curtis. How did you decide on a career choice of pastoring? Because when I was thinking about it, I knew it was the hardest job in the world. And the father of modern management, Peter Drucker, has said it's one of the top 4 hardest jobs next to President of the United States, President of a university, and pastoring. So how did you make that decision and deciding to work with people, which is pretty complicated?
Yeah. Well, that's a really long story, and I don't want to take a lot of time, but essentially I saw the desire in me to serve in church. So throughout my non-professional years, I always wanted to serve in church. And then friends encouraged me when I started talking about the possibility of going to ministry. So there was a little affirmation there. And then in my seminary, one of the most important teachings that I got there regarding this was that I needed to know for certain. I had to have a call from God. It couldn't just be my desires, couldn't be my gifts, couldn't be what other people said. It had to come directly from God. And so there was a day when I was just really frustrated and just really hurting. And because I didn't know what God wanted, I didn't know if he really wanted me to go into ministry or not. And just really had a time with God where I really felt he spoke to me. And I know it's subjective, but in reality, I've been a pastor since 2003, and it's stuck. Or not, actually 1983, since 1983. And the call was that year, and it's stuck in through the thick and through the thin of ministry. Really felt God has given me grace to be able to hang in there.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for working with people and giving so many years to doing that, and still in there in the middle of the community. Carol, where did your timeline intersect with Curtis? Did you know you were marrying a pastor? And how has your experience been in working with people?
So when we were first dating, he was already in seminary. So so I was jumping in, feet first. And at that time, I wasn't too excited about possibly being a pastor's wife. So, but somehow talking to another pastor's wife, I got a much more positive perspective of what it meant to be in ministry and what it meant to be a pastor's wife. Yeah.
Okay, well, very good. Now, both of us have gone through the seminary experience, and they provide a lot of good training in terms of teaching the Bible and cultivating a spiritual life, a little bit on relationships, but I'm not so sure how much of it prepared us to deal with this concept of shame. So from your experience, let's see, that's what, 30 plus years of working with people. How have you seen that shame affects people? And what is it that you are able to do as a minister to facilitate with healthy living?
I think that the first revelation for me about shame actually happened in my internship years when I was just starting and watching a family that was sort of disintegrating because of the lack of having really a healthy home, and they wouldn't talk about it, and there was no way anybody could help. And throughout ministry, usually you find out about shame afterwards. In other words, you see the results, or you see the tragedies, or you see the brokenness, and when they finally ask for help, you find out that that's been something that's been hidden for many, many years. And in fact, sometimes they come to you and say, please don't tell this to anybody else. And so the shame continues, but at least they're beginning to try to find their way out of it. So, and then of course with mental health, this has been a huge part of our struggle in our lives, of being able to be honest with people. And so we had to deal with our own shame. But as we continue to try to work it out, I think it is also maybe not quite synonymous, but definitely parallel to stigma, and being able to overcome stigma by just being honest. And there was one time when Carol was very sick, and we had a nurse in our church, my previous church, not the one I'm at now, and she was a nurse in a psychiatric hospital, and that was her profession. And we wanted to talk about it, and we wanted to be open about it, and she really encouraged us to. But she also offered us some wisdom about not divulging everything. So we could be, maybe the word be translucent, but not completely transparent at that time. But as time has gone by, I think Karen and I both have heard from other people that they feel like we're very transparent. So I think we've learned to be able to share what is needed to be shared, and sometimes maybe we share too much, other times maybe not enough, but we're learning.
Yeah, well, let's spend some time here, because this is really helpful, and thank you for being more open with your life and your struggles, because shame and stigma is very much tied together in all of that. And being human, we have brokenness, and we have weaknesses, or we need help from others. And so you mentioned there's some difference between shame and stigma. Would you explain that a little bit more?
I think they're related, but I think shame is something that you believe about yourself as well. It's something that is deeper than stigma. And stigma, I would say, is circumstantial. As long as you are in a safe place, that stigma may not be as strong. People may talk about it. You may feel more comfortable. But it would be shame that would keep you from being able to embrace the openness and the freedom that somebody who's trying to break stigma is doing. And so I would say that stigma has to do with the circumstances and the external realities that one faces. Shame is inbred. Shame is something that you grow up with, something that is almost approved. And stigma, you kind of know that there's something missing in that. Shame, you just feel like there's this inability to be able to ever come out of this shell. And so I guess I would call shame like a shell that just holds, the pain within ourselves. Stigma is that which is outside.
I think also that shame is a feeling, right? Stigma is like a noun.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. That really helps us to understand, because as we understand, then we're able to get out of that shell. Because one of the things that we've discovered is shame is really, really hard to talk about because we never talked about it. And so we're just stuck in that silence, and that silence festers and makes that shame more weighty, and you just kind of stuck in that black hole, So you also mentioned that you both personally have had to deal with managing your mental health. And we're speaking at a time when in the news, we've seen several pastors die by suicide. And so for someone in a leadership position of a community, of a faith community, it's extra difficult to talk about some of the challenges that we face as just being people. So how did you navigate that conversation of when did you decide to open up, and then how did you wisely share appropriately, whether it's in a classroom setting or in a Sunday sermon setting or in other settings?
The situation that presented us gave us only two options. One was to tell the truth about what's happening or make up a story. Those were our two choices, because Carol was so sick at that time when she had a serious episode with bipolar and was taken to a hospital. And we knew right away that this wasn't something that was going to get well quickly. So the elders of my church, I got them together. And I think this is sort of where it began, was me just being honest with my elders. And I'll always remember the compassion that they showed me and their willingness to help me. And they put their arm, one of the elders just walked me to my car, put his arm around me, and he said, we will walk through this together. So then they immediately said, take time off, take some time off, take care of your wife, take care of your family. We had 3 young kids. And so then, of course, I'm going to disappear from church all of a sudden. And so that's when I was talking about that nurse, that we had some conversation of how could I openly talk about what had happened to Carol with her bipolar episode and why I was going to take time off. So that's sort of how it began. And other stories from both of our lives, have been affected by the way it was well received. It was so well received, and people appreciated that honesty, and they appreciated our privacy as well.
Well, I'm so glad you're blessed with a faith community that is compassionate and caring, because that's not a common story for some.
Right.
And there are many people that have been hurt with church, and they have left the faith, or just very hurt and wounded that they haven't been able to find hope. So how are you managing your health now? It sounds like you're doing pretty well.
You want to go first?
Both of you, Carol?
Currently, I'm on medication, so it manages, the bipolar. It doesn't erase the effects of the bipolar, but it sort of puts a cap, like a top and bottom, on my extremes and highs and lows. So it's not, it doesn't control me. And so I still see a psychiatrist, and when things get a little bit like high or low or just difficult, I turn to my friends. I share with them, what's going on, pray for me, so I think that's like the 2 big things right now.
Great. How about you, Curtis? Because you're in a very stressful environment, so that requires not only spiritual care for yourself, but also your mental and emotional well-being.
Yeah, I mean, for most mental illness, stress is a trigger. So I have triggers every day. Right, as a pastor. Um, but we also have personal life challenges, and those can be triggers as well. So right now, I am still taking medication for depression, but I'm in a depressive episode right now, and it's been ongoing for better part of the last year, and the last 3 months have been particularly difficult, and then the last couple of weeks has been even more difficult for us. Just some very challenging and difficult problems that have arisen in our lives. So how I deal with it right now is, one is remember that I've gotten better before, and I seem to cycle about every 7 years or so, have a pretty significant depression. And the last one I had was 2012. So that is 7 years. But I don't think it's necessary every 7 years. I think it's just sort of in general, I seem to have these. So just knowing that helps me to know that I've gotten out of it before, and God has been so gracious to me. I think the other thing is remembering that I need help, that not to try to figure it out myself. Even though I've had depression since I was 19, and
Wow.
and so and it's not every day. I've had seasons, I've had years where I didn't experience depression. So, but right now it's a hard time, and so I'm seeing a therapist right now, and see her regularly, and also have a couple of friends that are just outside of our church that I can share with and let them know that I'm having a hard time, and to pray for me, and they can encourage me.
Well, thank you for taking time to chat with us while you're walking through that. And
well, actually, it's probably a good time for that, right? When we look at the Psalms, we see that when the psalmist is really down, he continues to turn to God. He continues to do his work for God. And we're trying, in the same manner, hard as it is, and sometimes not with a lot of success, but just keep getting up, keep going, keep working at it.
Well, we're cheering you on. And in our audience here at Erasing Shame, we have both Christians and non-Christians, Asians and non-Asians. And I believe that the church has a unique place and a unique gift and resource to people besides the medication and therapy, talk therapy. So one of the things that your church and you have started is something called Enlighten Ministry, to help churches and help people understand that there are resources and there are ways to get help for mental health. So when did you discern that it was the right time to do that, and how were you able to do that in the context of an ethnic Chinese church?
You want to share first?
So, to put it simply, it came upon accidentally.
Hey, that's okay.
So originally, since we were going through some mental health concerns in our family, we felt like we needed to find a faith-based support group to talk about it with other people. So we looked for something like GAMI FaithNet, but there wasn't anything in Ventura County. So we thought, well, we could just start one in our church. So we started asking around or talking to other people, and they said, well, you should do something more. And around that same time, Curtis's mom passed away in early 2018. And so he decided, in lieu of flowers, to set up a memorial fund for mental health. And so the money wasn't used for anything specific. But when these conversations were going on, we thought, well, maybe, we can use this money to start something like a seminar or something like that. And our goal at the end of this was to have a faith-based support group. So one thing led to another, and we just saw how God provided, and he gave us resources and people and finances with the Memorial Fund. And all of a sudden we had this October seminar last year. It was just amazing to see how God worked.
Yes, Curtis?
It was
Would you
also a way for us to deal with our pain. So when Kara and I were going through our personal crisis back in 2017, it began then. We were just really hurting. And one day I came home and I said to Carol, I need to do something with my pain. So we started asking people to pray. We actually had a 40-day prayer group that was praying for our family, praying for us. And then when that was over, the pain was still there and the desire was still strong to do something with the pain. And so as we had this opportunity to try to consider how could we start a support group, God brought different people into our lives. I would almost say, really miraculously, to help us to be able to put this seminar together. And then that became a way for us to say our pain was, I don't know if I say worth it in the sense, but our pain has been the fuel for us, especially for me, to prosper, enlighten, to keep mental health on the stove, to be willing to be vulnerable, and to try to get others involved. And so there's been, and it also helps with the depression. It kind of tells depression you're not winning, and this is a way for us to work at trying to overcome what's hard.
Well, thank you both for taking that bold step of faith. And I was blessed to be there last year, and you're going to have another one-day seminar coming up on October 19th, which is a Saturday.
Yes.
And it's in Thousand Oaks, and you just gave the geographic reference points there to Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. I'm driving all the way up from South Orange County, so and I've invited a few friends in my area to carpool with me to make that long drive, but it certainly would be worth it because it's so hard to find resources that are faith-based and easily accessible, and other faith communities can learn a lot from this. And I know you're working with NAMI up there, so you actually provide this as a service to your surrounding community beyond your church. So that's a wonderful thing. Anything else you'd like to say about the seminar as we invite people to come?
Our goal and our passion is actually in the title of our theme for this year, and that is to empower people to help others. And we really want to empower people in churches to know they can do something to help those with mental illness. They can talk about it in appropriate ways to break stigma. And so, we're just very excited about our lineup. We have 11 different workshops. They deal with mental health from children all the way to senior adults, and depression, suicide, our own way we look at ourselves, and how we deal with our own mental challenges are all going to be addressed. And so we're excited about that. And we have over 40 churches, I think, right now registered.
Wow.
And
great.
We have people coming all the way from Northern California to San Diego. So
great.
This is a good thing. And I think also, as you know, there may not be another one that's in an Asian church. And so we want to be able to really also encourage Asian churches to join together and to talk about mental health, and to be able to really work towards bringing comfort to those who are hurting. And so it's not just have a mental health ministry, it has a person that we want to touch, and somebody's life will be encouraged, somebody's life might be saved.
And one thing that's unique is not only is it because, we have the background of being in a Chinese church, it's a mixture of Asians and non-Asians. So it doesn't matter because it affects, all walks of life.
Amen. That's right. That's right. So thank you for doing that. And you're also providing some workshops in Mandarin Chinese, right?
One workshop in Mandarin, and it's very God's timing again. The Mandarin pastor at our church, before he became a Christian, when he was in China, he was a professor, and he was a doctor, and he's a psychiatrist, psychologist, and he was the head of his department in his university in China before he became a Christian. And so after he became a Christian, he's had a tremendous passion for people who are struggling with mental health. And so he'll be doing a workshop trying to help people understand what is depression.
Well, thank you both so very much. Look forward to seeing you that Saturday along with the other people there. And one of the great resources that your team has also shared with the world is recording those sessions and posting them free online as a resource for people who can't be there in person. So thank you for doing that. I hope your team is able to do that again. And for those that are listening to this podcast only on audio, what is the web address where people can get to those videos as well as register for the seminar?
EnlightenMentalHealth.org. Yeah. So that pretty much has things about our seminar and other resources.
Fantastic. EnlightenMentalHealth.org. We'll add a link in the show notes, and people can connect with you and with us on Facebook, on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes or whatever podcast player, except Spotify. Don't have a place for that yet. And on the internet at erasingshame.com. Well, Pastor Curtis, Lowe, and Carol, thank you so much for being with us on Erasing Shame. And I look forward to seeing you in a couple weeks.
Great.
Thank you, DJ.
Thank you.
Appreciate this time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being a part of Erasing Shame. Please rate and review on iTunes, subscribe on YouTube, and like on Facebook. Share with your friends and followers. Get all the details at erasingshame.com.